Welcome to the Z Pro Tri June Invitational Race Series. All of us at Zwift are super excited to bring some of the best triathletes in the world together to start this 4-race series here today. I'm Matt Lieto, and with me is Sean Jefferson. Sean, it's finally happening.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, great to be here. And it is finally happening, and it's going to be spectacular. Really looking forward to seeing these athletes cover the Watopia Figure 8 loop today.
Yeah, and the athletes are definitely the highlight of this series, but certainly Zwift is going to bring as great race courses as we possibly can to these athletes. So let's take a look at this week's race format. Today we're going to be taking the athletes out to Watopia for a little jaunt on the Figure 8 race course. It might not look that bad on paper, but this course, I think it stings a little bit with 2 summits of the KOM climbed in each direction. The 2 climbs would be pretty decisive, in my opinion, Sean, as they will not only be racing for the win, but in this race series, it's going to be points that are going to be awarded at the top of each climb as well.
Yeah, this course has those KOMs in reverse, and then you go over it again later in the race forward, and it will add some points for top 5 places across the both of those KOMs. So really interesting racing today, and how these points are gonna stack up in this series. So each series will be awarded points across the finish line, starting at 30 points for the winner, all the way down to 1 point for 30th place. So points awarded at both the KOM and the finish line on this series.
In weeks past, we've done the Z Pro race series. It's been whoever crosses the finish line wins, and that's your placing. But obviously, this is different because we're gearing up for a 4-race series where it's going to be accumulated points at the end. So tell us a little bit how racing dynamics and tactics play into it more when you've got these points up for grabs in the middle of the race. So it's not just who crosses the finish line first. You might cross the finish line 4th and still get the most points on the day, right?
Yeah, it'll reward people that are it'll play to their strengths. So the climbers across the KOMs in the middle will be able to really race for maybe some extra points there if they know they're not going to factor in a top 5 sprint finish. So really affects the way the race dynamics are going to play out, and where riders can really play to their strengths today.
More breakaways because of that, or do you think it'll still stay grouped up in these races?
Well, I think on today's course, we're going to see some splits, especially over the reverse KOM and the KOM on the final time. So I think we'll see some sprints for those points, but then it packing back up to come back together for that final sprint finish and final points across the finish line.
Awesome. Now let's go on to kind of the highlight of today in the series. It's going to be our riders list. So let's take a look at who we got racing today, Sean.
Yeah, this really is the highlight of the entire series. We've got 30 athletes that are truly world-class, some of the best triathletes in the world. So starting with Teresa Adams, Ruth Astle, Nikki Bartlett, Lauren Brandon, Joanna Brown, Lucy Charles Barclay, Sophie Caldwell, Lindsay Corbin, Flora Duffy, and Paula Finley. Flora Duffy, IT World Champion, and Lucy Charles Barclay, 3rd at Kona the last 3 years. Two incredible athletes.
Adam has won Asia Pac champs a few times, great cyclist as well. And then we got Jackie Herring, Meredith Kessler, Rachel Clommer, Kinsey Lane, Fenella Langridge, Jess Lermoth, Annabelle Luxford, Melanie Moore, Jocelyn McCauley, and Sky Monch. And on that list, Jackie Herring, Sky Monch, and Melanie Moore, they've been athletes that have been active in our series before, so they're going to have a lot of experience, and I think will have a good chance to shine here today.
Yeah, and definitely pitting some of the top ITU athletes in the world against some of the mid-distance and long course athletes is going to be interesting to see who can come out on top. Moving on to the last list, Angela Nath, Emma Pallant, Lenny Ramsey, Antonina Resnikoff, Laura Siddell, Chelsea Sodaro, Georgia Taylor Brown, Natia Van Heerden, Amelia Watkinson, and Kelsey Withrow.
Super talented women on that list too. Let's see who stands out to me on that one. I think Sodaro, obviously super talented. Resnikoff, she's great on those steep climbs. So I think she's going to have a great shot, especially on a course like today. as well as Emma Plant. She is one that is always consistently pushing the pace at the front anytime it goes uphill, and she takes racing quite seriously. So anytime she's ready to, or anytime she's on the start line, she's ready to race. So Sean, the powers that be were giving us a little bit of grief for only picking our riders, 10 seconds before the race was finished. So let's go ahead and pick who we've got. For today, I'm going to pick for the win on the course, Melanie Moore, but I'm picking Teresa Adam for my GC classification. What do you got?
Those are some really good picks. I'm going to go with Lucy Charles Barclay on today's course. She's got the experience. She's raced courses similar to this and won already. And then I'm going to stay with Flora. I'm going to actually go Flora for the overall win in the GC standings at the end of this race series.
That is a great call, and that's what's so hard about this series is there are so many all-stars. It's like any pick you make is going to be you're overlooking somebody. But Sean, power-ups are always important in Zwift racing, but especially in a series and on a course like this today. What power-up do you think, or power-ups do you think are most important for today's race?
Yeah, the aero power-up and the lightweight are the most important, but don't forget about the draft power-up across a lot of the flat sections in today's course. The breakaway burrito is definitely usable when you're really on the end pushing red line and someone's behind you. You want to get rid of them, and then the invisibility is just for those instigators, people that want to jump off the front and don't want to be seen.
Ready to kind of let it all pan out and see what happens on the race here today. So let's go to the pens.
Yeah, this is we'll get a chance to see the start line, where they're all lined up at, and really get a sense of the field size. 30 athletes, not massive in Zwift, but a great size for today's course with two relatively short climbs, and we'll see if those climbs really separate this field.
I think they will for sure. There's no doubt about that, and they are. I think you mentioned it maybe earlier today, Sean. I know we always kind of chat about it, but the first couple minutes of each of these Zwift races is gnarly, and it's certainly kind of the hardest part for a lot of people to get used to. Tell us a bit about how you kind of have to get started, kind of full on.
Yeah, before the gate even drops and opens up, you want to be at watts. So you want to be up to 5-6 watts per kilogram, right as maybe 3 to 4 seconds before the gate even opens. And then in the first 2 to 3 minutes, really maintain and keep that pack together. You don't want to let any gaps open. You don't want to let any riders get off the front or get ahead, and just really keep a tight pack. Be well positioned, especially going into any of the climbs.
Good points, and they've got a little bit of time to settle in here today before they hit that climb. But about how long until we get that first big test for today's show?
Yeah, the first climb on today's section will be the reverse KOM, and that'll come right at around 5 miles in. So I think it's 7K or 5 miles into today's course, and that'll be the first big test. There'll be a little rollers as we roll through kind of the tunnel here, but that reverse KOM is the first final test, and at the top is where they will get their first power up.
There you go. And somebody told Lauren Brandon that she needed to start off hard here today, and she was at the front taking a super long pull there. No surprise from Lauren Brandon. She's spends a lot of time riding indoors on Zwift, and obviously it's great when she gets outside as well. But she was super excited to get in this race course today. So she's one pushing the pace at the front as Lucy Charles Barclay goes up, as well as Laura Siddall. We already have a few athletes hanging off the back of the group, and now is not the time to be at the back of the group.
No, definitely not. As long as they're hanging off the back and not letting any gaps open, it's okay. Could be saving a little bit, but definitely you want to stay close. This is very tightly packed. It's not strung out, so the pace probably isn't too hot on the front. Looks like Lucy Charles with 3.8 watts per kilogram. More of a steady just effort trying to keep things honest. And we'll see how this plays out leading up to the climb, if anybody wants to attack or separate pre-first climb.
I would bet against it. I think all these women are excited to race here today, no doubt. But I think they're going to be patient, and they know that this is a different race, right? If they've done their homework and they've even done a little bit of preview, they know that the beginning isn't important. As long as you're not going to get dropped, you're fine. The important thing is making sure you get over both of those climbs in a position to maybe get some points, but most certainly play in the finish as far up as you possibly can. And one that's always finishing pretty consistently far up and is one that is definitely one to pick for this series was Fenella Langridge we just had on screen. She's super consistent when she's raced here on Zwift.
Yeah, you got it's especially in this start of the race in Zwift. You want to manage your effort in this first part because the climbs are super intense. So you don't want to overdo it leading into a climb. You've got Angela Nath on screen here. Looks relatively calm, still heart rate at 170, still quite high. But that's normal for the way these races start, and hopefully that'll settle down pre-climb.
There you go. I think it will. And we have noticed as we're going through, we do have an open world here today, so you'll see some other Zwifters kind of out on course. But don't worry, they don't affect the race as we're cruising through here right now. As we got Flora Duffy at the front of the group at just a casual 250 watts, 4 watts per kilo. As Flora is at the front, she's taking a drink of water. She knows she's comfortable. Again, these athletes are smart, right? So they know they don't necessarily need to push the pace early. It's about making sure they get those points. So, Sean, do you think this series and these races being points based will have less people instigating to try to break the race up? Like, do you think these groups will stay together a little bit longer than we've seen maybe historically?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, and I think it'll be course by course. It will be interesting to see where these tactics come into play today. Will athletes want to dwindle the group down before the climb starts, or really just wait for the climb, try to get the most points right at the top of the climb, and then settle back in? We got Lenny Ramsey on the screen, working well, doing 154 beats per minute, so she's significantly lower than Angela Nath was, but pushing quite high power to get towards the front.
Doing what she needs to make sure she can hang with this class field as they go through kind of one of the dirt sections of the course. Seems like most of the group is still together. Haven't gotten word that we've got any drops yet, and I do think that shows that they're being a little bit more casual. But I think we'll see some instigators up these first climb. Jackie Herring, she's raced right there. You can tell she's got the EVOC on there. She's raced with some of the pro teams here on Zwift. She's got a lot of experience. We've pointed out her a lot in the past for having a great setup, as we can see she has there on the bottom left side of the screen. She's got kind of all her nutrition. She's got her phone there with the companion app all ready to go, so she can hit the power ups when she needs to. But she is obviously one of the stronger athletes in the sport of triathlon, but she's also really embraced with
Yeah, and she looks really calm and controlled at this point in the race. Looking smooth, staying in the pack, trying to conserve energy. So we'll get a better idea once the climb starts how everyone's legs are feeling today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see who's the instigator once we get the bottom of that climb.
Yeah, and here's Antonia Reznikov, former pro cyclist who is now a pro triathlete for the last few years and really strong on the bike, really powerful on Zwift, and has had some success in the previous races we've done here. So definitely one to watch, and she's on the front, really pushing the pace at this point.
Reznikov here, 170 beats a minute. So she's pushing that pace, and they're definitely using any little incline to kind of stress things out there. We've seen Meredith Kessler in the middle of the group, Jackie Herring in there, Laura Sedal, Sky Monch, Emma Plant. They're all kind of riding steady, waiting kind of for that pain to settle into their legs once we hit the base of this climb.
Yeah, and yesterday we had a course recce where we took some of the pro athletes across the course, kind of give them a couple inside tips about where the hills are, how steep they are, and when to kind of push the power. So Reznikov did it 2 weeks ago, so she's familiar with the race course, and we'll see if knowing the course has its advantages. I believe it does, but as we've seen before, Flora Duffy, first time on Zwift, without any real experience, took her first win there. So we'll kind of get a good feel of experience versus new, and just whether they can push the power on today's course.
Yeah, absolutely. And here we go. We got Watkinson. She's an athlete that If you watch racing on the world front in triathlon, you know that at 70.3 Worlds, she had kind of the best climb of the group. I believe she led over the top of the climb in Nice here just this last year. So she definitely knows how to climb well, and it's a little bit different. Obviously on Zwift it's a little bit different, but also these climbs are shorter, and there's really not enough time, Sean, on these climbs to really suit a quote-unquote like climbing specialist or time trialist for that matter. They're really short and sweet, so you might see some athletes that we wouldn't necessarily expect to shine do so with these shorter climbs.
Yeah, it's that 2 to 5 minute power today on the climbs. The first climb will be the reverse KOM, which is pretty punchy and short to start, but then kind of goes into a more steady, like much lower percent grade rolling to the top. So I would say closer to 5 minutes there. But then when we come back through and go forward over the KOM, it's going to be about a minute 45 to 2 minute climb. So it's really that short power punch, not a long 15 to 20 minute climb today. So definitely different athletes, maybe not your climbing specialist, but more of your ITU style, high power, short power type stuff.
Can even change in the middle of a ride, right? Like I think, an athlete like we have on screen here, Sky Monch, it might be hard for her to deal with that effort the first time, but as they go around and have more time in their legs, those athletes like her and Meredith Kessler that have Angela Nath, really good strength over longer distance, they'll actually start doing better near the end of the race. So they might actually be some of the athletes pushing that pace the second time up that climb. But it all kind of depends on how hard the ITU athletes or the athletes that have that strength at that shorter, punchier effort, how hard they push it over this first time.
Yeah, and we just saw the flashing lights on the road there. So we are on to the first part of the reverse KOM. It's a pretty short effort, only 2.5K, and it's average grade of just under 2%. So we see it's going to kick up at the beginning, and then it'll be fairly rolling. So it's really just about getting up this first pitch, 4%. It will kick up to, I think, 8 to 10% for just a very short period, but then go into a rolling section. So you really want to make it over this first couple hundred meters and then settle back in. We'll see if it strings out here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to make sure you make it over with the group. If you don't, you're going to have trouble, especially even if it's just a rolly section. And Sean, tell us a little bit about that, how hard it is if you've gotten a gap to kind of get back on. As we see Sky Monch barely trying to hang on to the group. She's got a few athletes behind her, though.
Yeah, you don't want any gaps to open up. With the draft effect on Zwift, it's similar to out in the road. If you've got really strong riders off the front pushing the pace, and you have to do it all by yourself in the wind, especially on the downhill or the flat sections, it's going to be nearly impossible to catch up. So you see 5 to 6 second gaps just quickly explode to 15 to 20. So definitely don't want to let anything open up. It's stringing out here, and they're just over the steepest part, so it'll begin to start rolling. You really want to make sure you're stuck onto the back at this point or catching back up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Meredith Kessler was on kind of a preview of the course yesterday, and she knows this course very well, and she was practicing a situation just like this yesterday, making sure she gets on. And they definitely need to close that gap down, Sean, or else it's going to be trouble.
Yeah, she's got a little gap there. She needs to close it. She's working really hard out of the saddle, pushing to try to get over it. Hopefully some of these other athletes can help pull through, especially in the descent, and close this down a bit. But we've still got a couple more, maybe another K of this climb where it is really rolling before we start the descent. So there's a little bit of time to catch up, and hopefully she can get a little closer here. I don't see the time gap right now, but it looks to be about 2 to 3 seconds.
And we're on her screen, but she's not the only one getting dropped. There are a bunch of women getting dropped off the back of this group right now. That pace is super, super high. Lucy Charles Barclay over 6 watts per kilo at the front of that group. Emma Plant and Jocelyn McCauley also pushing the pace there. There's that little chase group forming, so we'll see if they can keep it close at all. But Georgia Taylor Brown in that front group as well, Laura Sedal, all pushing over 5 watts per kilo as they're kind of in the shallower section of the climb now. So that's a lot of watts for that kind of gradient, Sean.
Yeah, and Jackie Herring to the front now. And for these athletes, it is going to be important to be in a good position across the top, because there will be 7 points for the first rider to the top of the QOM, and down to 5th, it'll go all the way back to 1 point. So there are points here. There are points to be awarded, and this may be some of the race dynamics of really pushing hard to be the first over the top, or at least in the top 5, and then maybe we'll see us settling down. But I don't know. Once you get that gap, I don't know if you want to take the pressure off and let some of those athletes in the back, 4 to 8 seconds back, catch up on the descent.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what their tactics are if they continue to push over the front, because again, it is about these points. And some of those athletes that are dropped off the group, you can see them in the background, Sean, are Chelsea Sodaro, Lauren Brandon, Kelsey Withrow, Amelia Watkinson, Sky Monch, Rachel Clommer. They're all in that group as well. So, that's a strong group. If they, that flat section in between these two climbs and that rolly section, it's possible that a group could get together and bridge back up. But here we go into that first UOM. Ruth Assel is at the front. It looks like it was Ruth Assel, Macaulay, Adam, and it could have been Lucy Charles Barclay in 4th, but we'll get that. But it looks like Ruth Assel got most points over the climb for the first time.
Yeah, and here we go. Ruth Assel, Jocelyn Macaulay, Lucy Charles, Teresa Adams, and Jackie Herring. So points awarded for all of those athletes. We see some burning their ghost power-ups straight away. Not really going to do much in today's race, especially on the descent. So we do have 4 power-up points today. So at each KOM, so we just went through the first one. There will be a sprint point once we come down the hill and through the S's. We'll come across a sprint point at the bridge. Well, they will get their second power-up. The third point will be at the top of the forward KOM, and then with 1.8K to go, there's another sprint point before the finish. So quite a few chances to get sprints or power-ups here and play them tactically throughout this race.
Yeah, absolutely. The power-ups are super important. And right now, tactically, you can see this small group that's broken away and dropped a lot of this field, to be honest, is working well together at this point, pushing the pace, trying to get themselves further off the front of this group and keep it separate.
Yeah, and we've got some big names in that. Looks like a second chase pack. Flora was dropped and looks like in this chase group. Some others, Georgia Taylor Brown in this group. Looks like Paula Finley. I can't tell the other two. Maybe Caldwell. It's hard to tell from the kits right now.
Yeah, no, we'll get information on kind of what that gap is and what athletes are in that group, but they're definitely working hard to try to catch up to this front group who has obviously more power in numbers, able to spread across the road and kind of blob up a little bit as we go under sprint point here. No points up for grabs on this one, but as you said, power-ups, so all good there as Teresa Adam goes through in the front. And, I thought it was interesting that we did have some experienced athletes in that top 5, obviously for Zwift, Ruth Assel getting that first, getting over the sprint first. But we also had Teresa Adam was up there. She hasn't raced too much on Zwift, as well as Jocelyn Macaulay. So they were definitely willing to put the effort in on that first sprint.
Yeah, and an interesting group here. I mean, I know Resnikov and Moore are familiar with Zwift. They've been proven to be extremely powerful on those short, punchy climbs. Teresa Adams, we know, is a powerhouse on the bike, so not surprising to see her up there. Laura Siddell, again, another really strong Ironman athlete, always in the top of her races with bike splits. So definitely some surprising ones with Duffy and I believe Caldwell kind of missing that break. And I think that goes back to really knowing the course and knowing the length of those hills and where it's pitchy and where it's steep. And then that it did kind of settle in after that. So being able to get across and get up to the top, super important in Zwift.
Tell us a little bit about the tactics involved in that, Sean. Like you might think, it's not worth pushing the effort that early to break a group up. But if you're talking about points up for grabs, now these women that are in the front group of, let's call it, 18 or 20, they don't have another 10 athletes that they might have to sprint against. So they're guaranteed at least 10 points when it comes to the finish line. So there are tactics involved, and even if you might not get any points on that QOM, you might be able to get rid of other athletes that you're going to fight against.
Yeah, and especially at a finishing, if you can drop 5-6 athletes and only have to sprint against 1 to 2, it's you're in a much better position to earn more points instead of a big bunch sprint, big bunch sprint, which can be a little tricky, and it does come into play with which power up you have on the finish. If you've not got a good power up, you might want to push it from further out, so it's not as dependent upon having an aero helmet or a lightweight power up.
Yeah, because it comes down to tactics in the moment a lot more in the sprint, where if you feel good and you see people struggling, you can push for a minute and get rid of a quarter of your competition. And it seems like that's what this front group did here earlier. And Sean, on the preview that I rode with these athletes yesterday, this section popped out to me as a spot where if somebody really felt good, I know the speed is high, but it seems like you might be able to break away, but more likely than that, you could catch some athletes in the back of the group off guard and maybe get them blown off the back if you well timed it.
Yeah, and that's knowing the course. And if you wanted to attack, there was just an 8% grade over some of these little S's, and that's a great spot to launch an attack, really push high power over that little hill, and then get a couple athletes to come with you. Doesn't look like too much. I know they are riding hard, and there's constantly someone new at the front pushing the pace, keeping it honest. They definitely don't want that second pack with the power that's in that second group, especially on the sprint finish, a lot of the ITU athletes to come back to this group.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. They want to keep it where it is, and you can tell by the high watts that athlete like Teresa Adams was pushing at the front of that group. Laura Sedal coming through at 6.5 watts per kilo, so they definitely are all kind of taking their turns. We see little gaps every now and again. We see other athletes throwing up. I think that burrito just went up, but definitely a lot of different tactics going on as they go underneath another banner there. But just a bit to see that last climb. Who do you think this last climb suits the best, Sean?
I mean, this last climb, the KOM in the forward direction is shorter and steeper. It's just under 1 kilometer long, pretty short, pretty steep the whole time. So I like someone like Melanie Moore or Reznikov to really attack that climb. Also see someone, let's see who else is up there in that first group right now. Obviously Flora Duffy and Sophie Coldwell would be strong on that climb too, just given their ITU abilities. But we'll have to see if they can make up some time between here and there and really attack that climb to get over the top in a better position than they are right now.
Chase group that's still trying to kind of keep that time gap as small as possible. The time doesn't matter at the end, but if they can find a way to get back up to that front group, then we'll have a chance at getting more points or maybe catching some athletes on the back of this climb. But it is going to be a challenge for them to pull back any time on this front group on the left, as it does seem, Sean, that they're working really quite well together.
Yeah, the group on the left is just a much bigger pack, working well. Looks like constantly someone new at the front pushing the pace. Similar on the right side, we've got Sophie Caldwell. It looks like she's doing a lot of the driving of that second group, but she'll need some help with a lot of the other riders to come through and push those, like keep the pace high and honest if they're going to catch up. Because we see on the left, Lucy Charles at the front at 6.7 watts per kilogram. There will be no catching up if that pack on the left continues to ride well together like that.
Not at all. And with Sophie Caldwell in that group on the right, we have Paula Finlay, Kinsey Lane, Sophie Caldwell, Lenny Ramsey, Laura Duffy, Annabelle Luxford, and Georgia Taylor Brown. And they're now 40 seconds back. So I'm going to go ahead and call it they're not coming back. But so now, again, there is going to be tactics involved there, Sean. It's are people going to stop pulling through on Sophie Caldwell if they know they're not going to be able to catch that front group? Because it is still important that they finish as high up in that chase group as they can, is the point. So
yeah, I think at this point, if in the next couple K, if they don't see that time gap getting smaller, there will be a point where they just sit up and really try to go just for winning the second group, second bunch, and getting as many points as possible, kind of knowing they're not going to get the top 10 spots, and try to settle for the next best position they can get. So
yeah, no, it's hopefully they keep trying, because 39 seconds, 40 seconds, it keeps kind of going around that. It's not opening up huge, and you never know, that front group might start looking at each other because, again, it is tactical. It doesn't matter how much time they put on that chase group. It matters individually who can finish highest up on both that KOM, QOM banner and the finish line. So there's a ton of points up for grabs. If you're in that front group, you're looking that you can still possibly get 37 points from here to go. So, driving the pace at the front of that group yourself isn't really doing you that much good.
Yeah, and then you got the top 5 athletes who were over the top of the KOM before, already scoring some points. So Ruth with 7 points. I mean, if she just is aggressive on the next climb and gets to the top and doesn't care as much about the win, but then can hang on, I mean, her point total will be pretty significant come at the finish line here. So there's a lot of different tactics going into this new race series, and especially with these intermediate KOM points available. So definitely interesting race dynamics and new things to watch week on week.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool. You pointed out, Sean, earlier that, this huge list of incredibly talented women that we have here in front of us is crazy. And it goes over many different disciplines of triathlon, right? We got 70.3 ITU and Ironman athletes all in there. And to me, it's cool looking at that front group and that it does seem pretty well split, right? Like you got Jocelyn McCauley, Laura Siddall, Angela Nath, Ironman athletes, and then you've got Emma Plonk, she's great at 70.3, Laramoth, Bartlett, and so it does seem like there's a broad spectrum of athletes that are still doing well in the front group. But again, I am surprised that Flora Duffy got caught out on that first climb.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of the ITU stars got caught out here. Flora Duffy being the most notable, former world champion. And also Georgia Taylor Brown, she was 3rd at the ITU World Championships 2 years ago. So some big name ITU, Sophie Caldwell too, like some big of the bigger stars in that second chase pack. And it could be a little bit more about maybe experience on Zwift. I know that ITU athletes have been especially like stacked up to Lucy and some of the other ones in that first group maybe have not raced as much, but I don't know. Right. Could it be that the long course athletes in this course is just suits them better?
It's possible that the pace was on a little bit more than maybe it seemed it was because of the way the group was packed up. We did have some athletes drop out or get dropped pretty early, so that tends to suit a longer course athlete. Hitting those hard efforts already kind of fatigued. That tends to lend itself to a longer Ironman athlete doing a little bit better, but. Certainly a lot left in this race here today. Just a little over 11 kilometers. Still a climb to go in the descent. But Sean, tell us a little bit about, obviously that climb is, you kind of talked us through it, it's steep, it stings a little bit, but is there a little plateau? Like they don't get that steep descent there for a little bit, am I correct?
No, it's the very top, it'll flatten out a bit just to get to the KOM banner, but it's primarily just punchy and steep right from the start. And if you do have a little bit of sprint legs over the top, that's where you will want to use it. It's not just straight up. So saving real hard kick at the beginning, maintain it through the middle, and then if you can sprint like on that top banner, it'll be that's where the points will come from, those top 5.
So I look at that tactically, knowing that it's not that far from the finish of the race. What does that look like as far as after they go underneath that KOM banner till it descends and then they're kind of leading out to the sprint? What does that section of the course look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get the podium from this next climb. If there's any more split in this top 10, 12 athletes, the first group that goes away, it's like you said, it's so short to the finish, only a couple kilometers. Looks like around 7 kilometers to the finish. That if those gaps open, it's going to be hard once they hit the flats for those times to come back. 1 or 2 athletes off the front could potentially get pulled back, but if it kind of evenly splits and it's a 5 and 5 or 6 up front, 4 in the back, those gaps won't come back.
Yeah. It looks like we still have that chase group is still working to try to catch up to that. Our front group that we have on screen here with Emma Gallant, but at this point, does not look like they're bringing back too much on that front group. But Emma is she's always wanted to put her effort in, but she's got kind of a cool setup in there, Sean. She's got all lit up.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Trying to keep the room cool, got the lights going. I just wonder what music she's got on.
Yeah, so we'll have to have Emma tell us before next broadcast. Maybe we can get some sound bites of the music she's playing. But she's definitely rocking out while she's out there. And she's one that certainly, I don't think she didn't get in the top 5 on that QOM section the first time around, but I would be surprised if she's not the second time, because she knows it's for the win, right? You don't want to burn too many matches early, but I think we're really going to see some fireworks on the second climb, because all those points that are up for grabs, but that is, as you said, Sean, going to lead straight into kind of who is on the podium at the finish of the race.
Yeah, and the second climb is on its way. We're back towards downtown Watopia. They're going to do a little bit of a right-hand roundabout, and then they kind of get right into the climb. So we see Jackie Herring here, 173 beats per minute, 4.3 watts per kilogram. Fairly steady effort right now, nothing too much. I think these athletes know the climb is coming and are just trying to position themselves towards the front, so when the attacks start happening, they can respond.
I think as far as any of the athletes that seems to really, really have their tactics dialed, Jackie Herring is certainly one of them. Ruth Assel seems to have it pretty well dialed as well, but Jackie certainly takes this racing seriously, and you can tell with her results there as well. So back to the front of the race here, but Jackie Herring in this group as they get close to that second time up the QOM.
Yeah, so they'll flip around this little right-hand bend and then go across the bridge and start building towards that climb. And it is just under a kilometer up to the top of this forward KOM. So just about to get underway, and I think there's going to be some big attacks. We'll see who kind of kicks it off and who starts. I'd look for Maurer or Reznikov to make a pretty strong push on this climb.
Right now we have Nikki Bartlett on the front, Jocelyn McCauley. But if they've listened to you, they know it's gonna stink for a little bit, but they definitely need to be there early. Emma Pallant pushing into the red as they go around this corner. 10%, Sean, as they're just still in this early sections of this climb.
Yeah, and this is where it just is short, steep, and punchy. It will flatten out right to the top, so there'll be some room to kind of sprint over the top when it does flatten to get those points at the top of the KOM. I'm looking for 7 points for the first rider across the top. We'll see if Ruth can keep it up and stay in there, but it looks like Learmonth is up, pushing really well. Reznikov's up there. Teresa Adams again pushing the pace, and looks to be more as well.
Bit of gaps opening up there on the back. Lursadell, 2 seconds off the back. It doesn't seem like a lot, but if that continues to stretch out, it's going to be a hard gap for her to close. Emma Pallant there in the middle of the group. Teresa Adams still pushing at the front of this race. Melanie Moore in third place. I think she's kind of following wheels because she knows that she needs to be successful kind of at this sprint. But Jocelyn McCauley takes a turn as well as Lucy Charles Barclay puts herself in the front of this group and laying down just a little over 7 watts per kilo. No big deal, Sean.
Yeah, and this is where it's interesting. Will people sprint over the top for those points? And it looks like Lucy's using her power up here just to make sure she gets up across the top, gets those 7 points, and then we'll regroup, I guess, once this KOM is finished. But really, really, really high power here, really going for it over the top and wanting those 7 points. 8.3 watts per kilogram there.
Yeah, she's putting that effort in, so it does look like it's Lucy Charles Barclay, Teresa Adam, Melanie Moore, Jocelyn McCauley, and Jess Learmonth. It also does look like we had some pretty big drops on that climb too. Laura Sedal, Ruth Assel got dropped, as well as Herring, and Angela Nath was kind of near the back there. She's 4 seconds back, so we'll see if they were able to get that group back together, or if Lucy Charles Barclay and Teresa Adam and Jocelyn McCauley link up over this kind of flat section you talked about, Sean. They might be able to make sure those athletes don't get back on.
Yeah, and it looks like Lucy's trying to hold this little gap she had. She got the burrito at the top of the KOM. She's used it immediately to see if anybody was trying to come across, which prevents them from getting any draft off her. So do you think she could be trying to push that gap all the way to the finish?
She's going for it, right? And I mean, it's tactical, and I think it's a smart move. She's got an athlete, Melanie Moore, who's great at climbing, trying to bring her back on a descent. That's going to be a real big call for them to bridge back up to her. So right now, it's kind of her against the world, so to speak. But it's a second gap. It's not a ton, but she's holding it. So it does look like she's now getting pulled back by those athletes kind of working together. So, but it does seem Jackie Herring is now 4 seconds off the back of the group. Angela Nath just 1 second off the back. So that's going to be important whether or not this group of 8 continues to push to gap those other 2 athletes, or if they're going to let those stragglers back on so they can contest the sprint.
Yeah, and you can see here we've ghosted out the other athletes just to do a focus on Melanie Moore, and she's just looking really strong, low cadence, really pushing a low cadence, high power here just to kind of settle in. 60 RPMs, 237 watts, and just under 170 beats per minute. So looks relatively in control here. Doesn't look, taking a drink of water. Looks controlled, conservative, and I think she's going to be a threat across this sprint finish today.
And watching her drop those RPMs so much in this kind of recovery zone to get back in there, but super talented athlete there, as we have a great overhead shot of what looks to be 8 or 9 athletes. We definitely had Lucy Charles Barclays in that group. More, as we just saw, Laramont, McCauley, Resnikoff, Teresa Adam, Nikki Bartlett, and Emma Plant all in that front group. As we see the chasers trying to bridge back across, I want to say that's going to be Siddall and possibly Angela Nath. No, Angela Nath has made it up to this front group.
Yeah, it's Siddall and Jackie Herring, it looks
Siddall.
like. Yeah, still on the chase. 7 seconds, not insurmountable, but if this front group really pushes the pace, it could just quickly go up to 7.5 or 8, 9, 10 seconds really quickly. So they're kind of maintaining right around that 7-second gap. We'll see if they can really put a big effort in to just tag the back of this group before we start the kind of final push to the finish line.
Absolutely, and it's easier said than done to try to pull that gap back. And I think it's going to be I think those athletes at the front, Emma Plant, Jocelyn McCauley, are just going to make it a little bit too hard for those athletes to come across, and they are going to finish in the top 10, or at least be able to sprint for that 10th position to get some pretty good points. But right now we got under 5K to go. We've got this group of 9 athletes now at the front of the race, and we will start to see some tactics. Sean, do you think, is there anything left on this course where an athlete, if they don't really back their sprint, if they think they're going to finish 9th in a sprint of 9, is there a place for them to try to break away, to get away on their own?
I mean, there's some little rollers through here, and then there is another sprint point. So it depends how they use their power-ups. They could use their power-up on one of these rollers, kind of hope they get a good power-up for the finish as well. But I think it's going to be mostly packed up through here, stay together. I could see somebody who may not back their sprinting ability make an attack from longer out, maybe 800 to a K to go, but the majority of the fireworks are going to go off in the last 300 meters of this race, and we'll see a lot of the power-ups being deployed then.
We do still see that Laura Siddall and Jackie Herring group on the right side of our screen. They're about 10 seconds back now, trying to keep it as close as they possibly can. It looks like maybe Laura is getting dropped there a little bit, but staying, that's Laura right on screen there, sorry. So those 2 athletes still working well together, 10 seconds back, but I do not think they're going to be able to get back on there. So yes, the left side of the screen is going to be our focus. The way moving forward with just under 4 kilometers to go. We've got Emma Plant pushing 163 beats a minute, over 300 watts as they're cruising through this last little section. So Sean, if you're backing yourself for a sprint in a race like this, what are you thinking about if you're in a group of 9? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to avoid doing with just 3.5 kilometers to go?
Yeah, so right now it would be conserving as much energy as possible, staying out of the wind, staying tucked in nicely. Hopefully you've saved a aero power up through the last couple, either the KOM or we're going to get another one coming up really, really soon. Stay out of the wind as much as possible, and then just be prepared for any long attacks. So if anyone wants to jump at a K or 800 meters, just be prepared and be ready. So that's what I would look for in this final 3K, and we'll see how it comes out. Here, Nikki, focusing on Nikki Bartlett here.
Ironman Lanzarote in 2019. So she's definitely one that's pretty strong over a tough course. This is a tough course, but it's a lot shorter than Ironman Lanzarote. Definitely suits a different type of athlete, but she has that strength and power clearly to be able to get over these two climbs with her fellow competitors. But we'll see what kind of sprint she has left in her legs as we're just under 3 kilometers to go into the finish.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an exciting finish. This group of 9 working well together, trying to keep Laura Siddell and Jackie Herring off the back. I think those places will be pretty much solidified between the 9th and 10th, or 10th and 11th position. They just want to make sure they keep that third pack essentially far enough behind them that they don't come into play across the finish line.
Yeah, and here's a little kicker that could catch some people off guard here today, Sean, or give a launch pad if somebody wanted to get away. So the fact that nobody's created a gap here right now means to me that nobody's really trying to do it. As I say that, Learmonth pushes near 7 watts per kilo at the front of this group. So let's see if she gets any stretch in the field.
Yeah, and with Learmonth going to the front, Lucy Charles moves up to position herself on third wheel. Now up to second, Jacqueline McCauley up there as well. So I think we'll see a lot of shifting in the next couple K, and it will really come down to that last 300 unless we see a big move relatively soon.
No, I think you're right. I think right now it looks like we got Lucy Charles Barkley now pushing in the red, and these rollers can catch people off guard. If you use your momentum to come from the back of the group to the front and then really push that effort down, you can get a gap. So I think Lucy Charles Barkley played around a little bit to see if she could get that, but not this time through. So 1.5K to go. Learmonth out the front with Angela Nath, Emma Plant, Nikki Bartlett, Lucy Charles Barkley, Jocelyn McCauley, Teresa Adam, and Melanie Moore all in the front group getting ready to sprint it out for the first week of our Invitational race series.
Yeah, and it is stringing out a little bit. Some athletes dangling slightly off the back. You definitely want to be in that top 5 when the real sprinting starts. It's hard to make up those gaps if you're coming from the very back of the pack when it's strung out. You don't want to give anybody any extra space in that final 300 meters.
No, not at all. You've got to be on point. You got to be paying attention and really, really time your effort. And Shauna, we always talk about people or athletes timing or mistiming their effort. When do you want to let your sprint go in a finish like this?
Yeah, it's we got Jessica Learmonth here pushing really strong, being in great position. She's an ITU athlete, and especially on this course where it's a very flat finish, in that last 250 to 300 meters is when you want to use it. It's a pretty far out attack here, 800 meters. So this is what we're looking for. Someone who's going to jump early, and it looks like Lucy's out to the front. Teresa Adams with her pushing hard. So this is going to be a strung out sprint. It's not going to come down to the final 300.
And whether or not they're just doing a really good lead out, or if they're going to be able to, or if they're going hard enough to actually keep any athletes from coming around. But just coming into 300 meters to go, Teresa Adam really putting down the pressure now. Melanie Marr not far behind, but they are putting big watts in with just 250 meters to go, Sean.
Yeah, and it's still strung out, so there it is. They crossed the finish. I didn't catch who was leading. Was Teresa Adams still in the front at 10.3 watts per kilogram? It looked like she might have just held off everybody, but we'll have to look for the final results and the final confirmation from the servers to see who came across in those top 3 spots.
It looks like it was Teresa Adam for the win. She came across the finish line first. Jocelyn McCauley in second, and Melanie Marr crossing in third place. Lucy Charles Barkley in fourth, with Jess Learmonth in fifth. Man, that was huge numbers coming out of Teresa Adam on that sprint, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that jump from a little bit longer than expected. I think Lucy made a jump from about 800 meters to go. Teresa was right on her wheel and came over the top in the last 400 or 500 meters and just was able to hold off the rest of the sprinters and challenge across that line. But great racing from Jocelyn McCauley. I think not quite expected to be in the top 3 over today's course, but as we know, super strong cyclist and really tactically savvy today, and a great finish there. Melanie Moore has been strong across a lot of our Zwift Pro Tri-Series, finishing in third, and Lucy coming in fourth.
Yeah, super tough racing from Jocelyn McCauley and Teresa Adam to take those first two spaces in front of athletes that maybe have a little bit more experience in Zwift racing. And we should say there's a reason, Sean, I picked Teresa for the overall. Is she's really, really talented just as a cyclist. I believe she won the New Zealand Time Trial Championship amongst the pros, and I believe was third place in the road race. So she definitely has some palmares when it comes to bike racing.
Yeah, it seems like someone slipped you a hot tip and tipped you off to who is feeling good and really strong today. Because I know we haven't seen much of Teresa Adams, but she came out and smashed this race. Awesome to see her across the front on the finish line. And especially since with this time zone, it allows these Australian athletes and New Zealand athletes to come in and be able to participate. So great to have them involved. And she comes out today with a win.
Absolutely. And, I think, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was kind of Lucy Charles Barclay doing that early effort that almost let her out. And Teresa Adams had that maybe a little bit more staying power as it comes down to that last 100 meters. But here's the points total for today for those top athletes, Sean.
Yeah, and this is where the KOMs come into play. Lucy Charles getting 7 points and Teresa Adams getting 7. She must have got double points, one on the first KOM and one on the second. But coming in, and at the end of the day on the GC standings, it's Lucy and Teresa sharing the top spot with Jocelyn McCulley, strong third position.
Super tight racing. So I think, there's some big gaps there, 10 points from first place to fourth place. So consistency is certainly going to pay off down the road. But here's athletes that were able to get a decent amount of points through today's series. Jackie Herring with 21 and Laura Siddall, they sprinted it out for 10th and 11th place there. Fenella Langridge in 18. So they're still definitely kind of in the running. And Sean, we're going to mix up the type of races each week, so it's going to suit different athletes. But I will say that stuck out to me, the surprises were those ITU athletes that didn't make that front group over that first climb.
Yeah, a little bit of a shock there, especially with some of the athletes that we typically would see up towards the front, like a Sophie Caldwell and definitely Flora Duffy. But here we go, the bottom 21 to 29, Lindsay Corbin tied for 29th, Chelsea Dodaro again 29th. Athletes getting dropped early. I know the experience on Zwift might be a little light, so a couple more racing opportunities there, and maybe different course styles will suit some of these athletes better.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see as it goes, and we're going to have different instigators, but well-rounded athletes are at the top on that first week, so they've certainly set themselves up to be able to take advantage of this series. And here's a replay of that pretty big gap Teresa Adams had as she came across that finish line, Sean.
Yeah, she made that. She covered that first jump really well and kind of came over the top really strong, and she was just able to hold off a really fast charging Jocelyn McCulley and Melanie Moore, who just ran out of room. But again, awesome racing from Teresa, and really look forward to how she races this series, because she is a little bit of an unknown compared to some of our other Z-Pro tri-racers that we're a little more familiar with. And here we go, straight into the men's race, racing the same course, same KOMs and points at the top on both the reverse KOM and forward KOM. And again, super high-powered start. Really going to want to watch to see if everybody's paying attention and not letting any early gaps open up on today's race.
Yeah, no, it's certainly going to take athletes paying attention and making sure that they don't let any of those gaps open. Because I do think, Sean, I don't necessarily think it was the legs that had the women's race separate so early. I think maybe there was just some athletes that didn't expect that effort up that first climb exactly when it happened on that climb. So I think for the men's race, they're going to have to pay a little bit of attention. We see Jackson Laundry on screen here, Sean, but tell me about this field. This field is pretty nuts. Just like in the women's race, we have athletes that are spread across all different disciplines and distances. But tell us about a few of these athletes.
Yeah, I mean, this is just an incredible field we have on the men's side. Same on the women's. We've just got some of the best athletes in the world. We've got the 3 medalists from Rio in the race, Alistair Brownlee, Johnny Brownlee, and Henry Skuman. We've got Lionel Sanders, Joe Skipper, 2 powerhouses on the bike, and a plethora of Ironman champions here. So some of the more interesting ones, we've got some the ITU world champion champions. A couple of racers are here. We'll go is the full list. So Sam Appleton, really strong rider, 70.3 racer. Reese Barclay, Christian Blumenfeld, super strong on the bike, great ITU athlete, 70.3 racer. Trenzo Bazone, Jared Brown, again, Alistair and Johnny Brownlee, both medalists in Rio. Anthony Costas, who's been proven to race the Z Pro Tri-Series, really strong. James Cunnama, a couple wins in the series already, and Brandon Curry too. So,
talented athletes there. We also have Tim Don in that group as well. Philip Graves, Matt Hansen, Gustav Iden. No big deal. He won 70.3 world champs last year. Ben Canute has had a podium finish at that race as well. Jackson Laundrie in the field. David McNamee, the man from that was stuck in his Spanish flat for, I think, 2 months, just a couple months ago, began to love Zwift in that time. So he's racing with us. Seth Odin, as well as Mike Phillips and Tim Reed.
Yeah, again, really impressive list. Aaron Royal, Matt Russell, Lionel Sanders, we mentioned already, super strong, definitely always on the podium at the Z Pro races. Ronnie Schildneck, again, just these athletes, Henry Skuman, bronze medalist, Joe Skipper, super strong cyclist, great triathlete. Casper Storms, one of the Norwegians. We've got 3 Norwegians in the field, so potential for any team tactics, we'll see. Matt Troutman, Tim Van Berkel, and Kenneth Vanderdrijs, one of the most aggressive racers we've seen in Zwift in the past few races here.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Vanderdrijs a lot, I'm sure, in this series, because he's always one that goes for that breakaway when you don't think there's a chance somebody can hold the break. Kind of tries, he gives it a shot, and it's going to work one of these days. So look forward to watching that. An interesting point I think that you brought up, Sean, was kind of the possibility of team tactics. And I think in a point series, if the Norwegians decided to work together, I think it'd be a huge advantage. Because tell us a little bit about why in a points race maybe that could even be more advantageous.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen team tactics from the Norwegians before in some IT racing. We saw them sweep WTS race in Bermuda a few years ago with Casper Storms actually taking the win. Blumenfeld's been a 70.3. I think he had the world record at one point. So incredibly strong athletes there. Gustav Iden was 70.3 world champion. So these guys are all studs and super strong on the bike. If they can get a gap away and get a gap off the front and work together, they can take KOM points and then points on the finish. So it's something definitely to watch out for.
We'll see. I'm sure they've got it all planned out if they decided they want to do that. But we'll see. We've got Matt Russell with a little gap off the front of the group, Sean, at a 3% grade. We haven't seen too much out of Matt Russell in the series before, but here we go. He had a second gap going into this roller, but sometimes that momentum going into a roller like that, the group can suck you up pretty quick.
Yeah, and we've seen Matt Russell race a few of our Z Pro Tri-Series. He joined one of the recce rides 2 weeks ago. The previous times he was racing on his iPhone, so very hard to see numbers and position. He's assured me he's improved his setup. He's got a TV in front of his bike and trainer now, so he's got a much better vision of the race, and we'll be able to see where those time gaps are, splits, and position himself hopefully a much better today.
For athletes that don't have as much experience in Zwift, you might think, oh, you just get on, you ride as hard as you can, but it is a bike race, right? And we can see this is a great shot to try to explain this, but there's tiny little gaps, and if you get a 3-foot gap, it becomes harder for you, right? So if you're trying to look at that through a little screen of a computer, it's a lot more difficult than if you've got a TV screen or a monitor in front of you that you can pay a little bit more attention as. Philip Graves had a great result the last time we raced. He's one that's able to push the power when he needs to, and I think he's one that if he makes it over this first climb, is certainly one that's going to be a factor.
Yeah, Ironman UK champion and 70.3 champion, really strong on the bike, and again, successful on Zwift, Z Pro Tri-Series, and experienced racer on Zwift. So definitely one to look for, especially on looking towards the first climb. That's not just a couple K away. We had look for someone like Gustav Iden. He made a really strong move in 70.3 worlds to come across and over the top of of that climb with the leaders and end up putting him in a position to win 70.3 Worlds. But now we're having a look here at Henry Skuman, bronze medalist in Rio, great all-around triathlete, stellar swimmer, always one of the first 2 or 3 out of the water, and tactically a very good cyclist, and we'll see him joining.
Yeah.
This is his first Z-Pro Tri-Race Series, so definitely interesting to watch, keep an eye on him and see what he can do in this series.
Real fired up to be a part of the race series, and he was excited about it. Did a preview. I think he was there with you a few weeks ago, and he's one I think that's a little underrated as a cyclist. I think often people look at ITU athletes, and if they're really good runners, people just assume they're not great at riding a bike. But I've seen some really good performances out of Henry in non-draft legal races. Makes me think that he certainly has the power to stay in a group. And another athlete that's been very, very, very consistent over our series is on the screen now, and that's Jackson Landry.
Yeah, and we know he's familiar with the course. He was in the last 2 recce rides we did, so getting a lot of time on this course, knowing the climbs, and he's right there in the pack, positioning himself well, and exciting to see what he can do today in this, and then across this whole series, because he's been consistent, and he's been really strong athlete here.
Joe Skipper, we got David McNamee on the screen here pushing the pace, 158 beats a minute. There he is in his Spanish flat, looking smooth as ever. And David McNamee looks so smooth on a bike. He could be going 0 watts, 600 watts, and you could balance a cup of coffee on his shoulders. So very smooth riding from David McNamee. On the screen earlier for a second, we had Joe Skipper at the front of the race. He's one, Sean, that the last time we raced, he was an instigator, and he certainly has the power to do well in a race series like this. I'm curious if he'll instigate less, knowing that it's kind of cumulative points series.
Yeah, he made a big move in the last time we were in Innsbruck, and right before the climb, he had a couple, maybe a minute gap, and that dwindled relatively quickly once the climb started. So maybe a little too aggressive on that first time up, but we'll see if he learns from that experience and can be a little conservative and time that attack a little better this time.
And here we go. We got Matt Troutman on the screen there, 438 watts at 150 beats a minute. That's a diesel engine right there, everybody. Matt Troutman out of South Africa, making sure he's putting in a solid effort here, as they're still haven't hit any of the hard sections of the course yet, but it's coming quick. Sean, who do we think is going to go to the front and push the pace? I think it's going to be Sanders, but who do you think?
I think it's going to be one of the Norwegians. I could see them really smashing this climb, this first climb, trying to get a separation and breaking this field apart. They're actually onto it now, so it starts off relatively light, and then we'll kick up really quick here once we make the turn, and you see those aliens on bikes is where the steepness really kicks in. So really got to be on top of it here. Matt Hansen towards the front, pushing big power to stay up there, and it's going to be this is where it's going to string out, and we'll see if the pack stays together or we lose a couple athletes on the first climb.
Pushing it hard. We've got Sanders at the front, Braden Curry of New Zealand pushing the effort, Alistair Brownlee. We haven't even talked about the Brownlees yet. That's how deep this field is. That's crazy, as Matt Hansen pushes over 500 watts as we're going into this section of the climb. Lionel Sanders has a little bit of a gap. Looks like he is trying to get that gap already here pretty early in the race, Sean.
Yeah, and I think Lionel knows this course like the back of his hand. From rumors we've heard, he's gone over this course multiple times in the last week. He's really prepared for today's race. Yep. He probably knows every inch of this course, and he's really showing it on this first part of the climb, going hard at the steep part, and probably looking to get a little help once the rollers hit. But I imagine he's going to go for this KOM and be first across the line today.
Going for that, but I also think he's playing a little bit of offensive defense, trying to get rid of as many people, get rid of some of that pack fodder, so it doesn't maybe become so tactical in the middle section of this course. But that pack is looking pretty all together. It did look like we got a couple athletes maybe dropped off the back of this group. It looks like we've got Ben Canute, looks to be maybe a little bit off the back there. 182 beats a minute, pushing that effort pretty hard is Ben Canute at about 350 watts, and he's got a couple other athletes with him.
Yeah, again, a couple seconds here. We saw this in the women's race where this few second gap really does open up and lead to pretty much the end of your race. So we'll see if this smaller group can chase back on, especially once they come across the KOM banner. You might see a little, it doesn't look like they're too far behind, so it looks like they've got a chance to close this back up. But yeah, you don't want to let those gaps open, and especially once the descent starts. So I think they're going to get back on here. They just got to work extra hard to get to them.
Yeah, they got caught off a little bit. There's Sam Appleton in there as well, but it looks like they're gonna get back to that front group. I will say I've got to call out Sean for one of the athletes that made the front group. That's Tim Reed. Tim Reed's been sick all week with a stomach bug, and he's still in that front group. And I think it's about 4 or 5 a.m. where he's at. So thanks for joining us, Tim, and having such a great performance. But right now it's Sam Appleton who's just off the back of this group trying to chase back on, but looks pretty lonely over there.
Yeah, it's going to be a lonely race if he doesn't put something together here and catch back up. There is some disadvantage. I believe Appleton's at altitude. Don't want to give him any excuses, but and obviously being at altitude in a high power race like this is going to be extra hard to make up any time gaps and push that high end power. And here we go across the line at the first KOM. Looks like Vanderdrijs maybe across the top.
It does. It looks like we'll get the leaderboard here in a second, but Vanderdrijs was certainly looked like he was timing it pretty well with Anthony Costas, and Lionel Sanders looked to be in there as well as Ronnie Schildknecht. So we'll see what order they came over. I'm getting word that it was Lionel first off, but we'll get official word as we watch these riders go down. There we go. That is it. Lionel Sanders first, Reese Barclay with a great performance coming across in second, Anthony Costas in third, and Ronnie Schildknecht in fourth, and Philip Graves in fifth place.
Yeah, impressive there from Reese. He's been impressing every time out over the last few weeks. So you could tell his strategy here is trying to get some of those early KOM points, and then finish in the top 10. He's going to have a nice day on today's race. So big points there for Reese. Obviously, Lionel kind of predicted early that he's looking for those KOM points. It kind of takes a little bit of the pressure away from that final sprint if you've taken a couple KOMs during today's race.
It's super tight finish for those 5 athletes to separate themselves by a little bit, but you can see that large chase group forming from behind. So there's definitely splits in the field, and I know those 5 athletes at the front were going for points, but I guarantee you they're going to be on this flat section pushing that pace to try to distance that chase group that's following behind.
Yeah, and this is where it'll be interesting. Will they back off now that Lionel's got the first KOM? Will we see Lionel sit in, be a little patient? I think we will. And does that kind of backing off or sitting in allow that group of 5 or 6 that were kind of dangling off the back around 3 or 4 seconds a chance to get up and join this group again and get ready for the next couple sprint points and then climbs? But again, Lionel using an aero helmet, it looks like he's really trying to push the pace and separate this field, keep that group away. Maybe scared of a couple of those 5 riders that were in the back, but Lionel looking really strong and aggressive in today's race already.
Oh, it's crazy. And not too surprised that Lionel's one that takes his racing very seriously, but he certainly is the instigator. He might be battling Kenneth Vanderdrijs for the most combative award here today, as we see Braden Curry going to the front, taking a dig, has a second gap over the field. So Braden trying to mix it up here. Early morning for him down in New Zealand. He got his coffee before, and he's trying to see if he can get Alistair Brownlee to come across.
Yeah, and we see Alistair Brownlee here on screen looking really calm, nice, smooth riding, only at 3.5 watts per kilogram, sitting in nicely, 152 beats a minute. We've seen Alistair be really aggressive in a lot of the Z Pro races early on. I think the most recent ones, he's been a little more tactical, sits in a little more, and I'd imagine it looks, at least today, it looks like Alistair's going for that overall win and not as aggressive on those climbs.
No, not at all. But man, Braden Curry's a 2.5 second gap, 3 second gap now on this group. I'm not sure. I mean, he hasn't raced with us too much, but I mean, I think he's kind of hanging out there, hoping that someone will jump across that'll have someone to work with to make this stick. But this is a long way out to go if you're going for the final 30 finish points, or even just for that next KOM. But he's pushing out, consistent watts. It's nothing crazy, 4.5 to 5 watts per kilo. But I think he's kind of just waiting out there to see if somebody wants to jump across.
Yeah, and it looks like they're starting to close this down. I think we'll have a couple athletes try to make that jump, and that'll probably pull the whole pack together and bring him back. It is a long way to be out on your own, but not impossible if the guys behind kind of sit up and play it a little more tactically.
I think that's right, but good on Braden Curry for mixing it up a little bit. It doesn't look like, he definitely burnt a match, but it didn't look like the watts he was pushing once he was settled in were anything that'll hurt him. But you need to make sure he gets right on the back of this group, Sean, because a lot of times that kind of accordion as a group goes by you, if you're not ready to get on, you can get spit right out the back. So let's see if Braden Curry is able to attach himself to this group. But right now we got James Cunningham, super strong long distance athlete that has done incredibly well in the past. That's done really well in our Zwift racing too.
Yeah, Kunema's been impressive. Especially he had a great result. I think he pulled out the win on Crit City, which is maybe not who you would pick to win a crit style race, but he showed his tactics were perfect and timed his attack really well. So, and he's got the power in a sprint to be up there with anybody in today's race.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's one that I think the harder the race is, Sean, I think the better chance he has to be able to excel at the end of it. Well, kind of one of those things that, if everybody's legs are tired, I think James is going to be firing at a level that's going to get him a good sprint.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to still see. We've got some other names that haven't really raced as much. Aaron Royal still here. Henry Schumann up in the front group. Tim Don. So all stellar athletes in their own right. World champions, duathlon champions. It's the who's who of triathlon in today's racing.
Yeah, crazy. Certainly there's some names, if there's a name on there that you don't recognize, it's probably because you don't follow a triathlon or maybe different types of triathlon racing like ITU too closely. But right now we've got Ronnie Shilnek on the screen. He's continuing or consistently getting better that each week that goes by as far as our Z Pro Tri Series in general. And he's one that's taking this racing pretty seriously here today. He's won more Ironmans than you can count, and one of the nicest guys in the sport. So we're stoked to see Ronnie joining us in this Invitational race series.
Yeah, and we're really zooming in on him here, seeing the numbers he's putting up, riding at 100 RPMs. What do you think we see a big difference between kind of the RPMs the ITU riders ride at and the Ironman guys, or is it all going to be relatively similar across today's race and just given the course we're on and the style of riding we're doing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. ITU, I'd imagine, are probably, cadence can be something and RPMs can be something that, everybody has their own kind of thing where they settle in. But I would say in general, the longer distance athletes maybe will focus more on holding a consistent RPM, like more of an 80 or 90. So I think you might see lower RPMs coming from those longer distance, more time trial effort guys, where the ITU athletes are used to, spinning up to stay with the group and kind of more variability in their RPMs. But right now, Casper Storn's at the front, 180 beats a minute, just over 300 watts there. He looks super comfortable. Again, kind of similar to what I was saying about David McNamee, Sean, is that, he's very, very smooth at really high watts.
Yeah, and I believe this is the chase pack he's pushing to try to catch back up with some of these athletes, because it looks like on the side we still have Tim Don at the front and Blumenfeld at the front of the other pack, but Casper Storn's really driving that second pack, trying to bring 5 or 6 of these athletes with him. He needs a little help there if they're going to make up any time across to this big first group, who we see is still riding hard. Philip Graves on the front, pushing Joe Skipper back to the front. Brownlee to the front, so it's a real firepower in this front group, and that second group to make up any distance is going to have to be a very, tight knit and very strong effort.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be incredibly hard for them to be able to bring back any time on this group. And what's crazy, Sean, about the way this race is kind of set up here today, but just the quality of field, is that you can have, you know, a Joe Skipper at the front of this race and a Braden Curry pushing the pace with a James Cunema, and then you can just have Alistair Brownlee hiding in this group, right? Like, there are so many super, super talented athletes, Blumenfeld, that we're not seeing at the front, and they're saving themselves because, again, this is a tactical race. It's not about who does the most work, who has the highest watts per kilo at the end. It's who gets across these 3 points as far forward as they possibly can to earn points down the road for the series.
Yeah, a lot of tactics in today's race, especially with the addition of the KOMs and the points across the top. So really, you want to only be in the front at a couple points across each KOM and then the finish line. So anything in between, if you can stay out of the wind and just recover, that's the key to keeping those watts per kilogram lower, keeping that average lower, and then really just having the legs across the top of the climbs and then the finish point.
And here's that chase group, or one of the groups that we have in the back, and that's Tim Van Berkel. Early morning for him in Australia. I think he got up about 3:30 this morning to join us. Thanks for joining us, Tim. Putting in the effort, 180 beats a minute. So they're certainly doing their best to try to come back. And that first chase group, word on the street is that it's 35 seconds back that group is trying to bridge up. It's going to be hard with that firepower and the size of that front group, Sean.
Yeah, and we saw a very similar group in the women's race that never caught up, and I think kind of went back to around that 50 to 60 second gap by the finish. So a group of 5 or 6 versus a group of 15, it's just not going to happen unless this group, the front group, completely set up. And we got Aaron Royal on the screen, looking relaxed, sitting in, just kind of tapping along here, trying to save himself for the next climb.
Crazy about the depth of this field here today, Sean, is that we haven't talked about Aaron Royal yet, and he is one that, and we haven't yet. We didn't get to do our men's picks, so we'll go ahead and do it now. I'm picking Aaron Royal for today's race. Who are you picking?
I've got to go with Lionel Sanders. I think the amount of effort and course previews and tapering he's done for this event is gonna put him on top, and he's been aggressive and looks good so far today already.
Even though those picks are good, we'll probably get upset by somebody else because that field is so stacked. As we see, Tim Don has had some crazy fast times over the Ironman distance record at one point, I believe. So that's Tim Don on screen there on the left. He's got some fans in there with him, maybe spritzing him with some water, giving him some advice, telling him to hang in there. But he's doing a great job at the front of this race. Tim Don, 145 beats a minute. Just over 4 watts per kilo. Oh, there's 7 watts per kilo there for a second. So Tim Don doing great work.
Yeah, and we've got Blumenfeld still in this pack. Cunema, who we've seen do really well in the sprints. This is a very flat finish, so watch out for Cunema as well towards the end of this race. Skipper still in there towards the front, pushing the pace. And I mean, again, like, you could pick any one of these top 15 athletes. They're all, stars in their own right, and you wouldn't be blamed for picking any of them. So it's definitely a hard choice, and we'll see how this course plays out and who it really benefits in that final sprint finish.
Yeah, another name we haven't talked about who's amazing athlete, Mike Phillips from New Zealand, in the front of this group as well. Both of the Brownlee brothers still in the front of this group. So to say there's firepower in this group would be a vast understatement. So let's see if anything happens kind of in this middle section, Sean. Is there anything in this section before we get to that second time of the climb where maybe some people could get caught out off the back, or do you see someone that maybe like a Vanderdrijs or somebody that would try to get off the front of the group?
I wouldn't imagine so. I think at this point, most of these riders are just trying to conserve their legs because they know how hard that second climb is going to be, and that's going to be the biggest point of make or break. As we see Johnny Brownlee here, just positioning himself well towards the front. You want to be towards the front on this. You don't want to be in the back, especially if it strings out. So yeah, Johnny just doing a good job here, riding relatively hard, 5.8 watts per kilogram towards the front, pushing the pace, making sure he's in that top 5 or 6 as we head towards the second climb of the day.
one that certainly has the power. We've seen him do well in courses with sustained climbs. This climb again is a legitimate climb, but it is quite short. But I do think Johnny Brownlee has that power over that short distance, that effort that's going to have him do well at the front. Just whether or not, again, it is tactics, Sean, whether or not you give it all to try to get as many points over that KOM as you can, or with a group this size, it's really quite important that you get over that KOM with enough energy to then put yourself in a position to have a good sprint. And I do think with this field and with athletes like Lionel Sanders, people are going to try to get away after that last KOM into the sprint finish.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be a very strong attack on this next climb. We'll probably, we got someone going off the front already, which the climb's only about a K away, so a little risky pushing hard here. And who would you guess it is? Vanderdrijs.
It's got to be Vanderdrijs. If I was a guessing man, I'd say it's him. He wants to make sure he gets the most combative jersey, and definitely in the running. So Vanderdrijs always one to put it down when nobody is expecting it. So he's trying to get a gap going into that climb. He's got a little over a second, and it's just going to depend whether or not the group decides to chase and put that effort in. And he's continuing to stretch it out a little bit. So he's got 1.6 seconds over the group now that has Braden Curry leading the charge.
Yeah, I kind of imagine they'll let him get a second or two here, and it is up to 2.5 seconds by the time this climb starts. Because of how strong this and how much power is going to go into this climb, you don't want to go in, slightly fatigued or tired or already done a big move. So we'll see if he can hold it up the top. He's obviously going to try to get that first 7 points across the second KOM, and up to 3.5 seconds here. So he's going to have a little bit of a head start.
He's holding his watts in a manageable zone. I mean, 5.5 watts per kilo is a lot, but it's a zone that he could increase going up this climb, right? Because he's going to have to, because these guys are going to absolutely be attacking each other when they hit the meat of the climb. So he's keeping it into control as he hits the climb. He's now hitting over 6 watts per kilo. He's going to touch on 7 here in a second, but it's 3.5 seconds to Tim Don, who's at the front of the group. But Vanderdrijs, always the instigator, 10, 11%, still 3.5 seconds over the chase group.
Yeah, and we'll see if they can start pulling this back. I assume Brownlees and Sanders and Cunningham will start to pull this back slightly. But a 3-second gap here, Kenny might be able to hold this over the top and get these 7 points.
Going for the 7 points, Sean, but we'd be naive to think if he gets over the top with a gap, he's not going to try to go all the way to the finish, because that is Vanderdrijs' style for sure. We got Lionel Sanders now on the right, pushing the pace, trying to bridge up to Vanderdrijs, who has a gap all on his own, but he's on the flatter section going into the descent as the group was climbing there a little bit. So 3 seconds with a gap for Kenneth Vanderdrijs over Sanders and the group behind.
And it looks like they're getting ever so close, and might pull him in. Hard to tell. It's going to flatten out here across the top, and a group will be able to go a little faster through the top. But someone to watch out for who's been really quiet is Costas, who's proven to be great on the hills, but Lionel making a move and moving up strong too. And Lionel looks like he's moving towards the front again.
But there we go. Sanders and Alistair Brownlee at the front, trying to get the KOM is in view. So Sanders really putting the effort down. Alistair Brownlee behind Vanderdrijs in third. Let's see what happens as we come across the line. It looks like it's going to be Sanders, Brownlee, and Vanderdrijs holding on to third, possibly with Curry and Costas. We'll get official word, but it does look like it was Sanders first across on that second KOM.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's going to be interesting to see if some of these riders do continue pressing here, trying to split this up. It looks like 4 or 5 riders off the back who just came across the KOM might be getting dropped, and we'll have to work super hard to get back onto this pack before we hit the flat and really start driving for the finish.
Going to have to put that effort in now. We see some athletes burning some aero power-ups, trying to bridge across. We got Aaron Royal. Looks like a small group is kind of forming. Things are stretching out there in the middle. Vanderdrijs comfortably in the middle of that group now, but it was over the top of that climb. It was Sanders, Costas, Schilneck, Alistair Brownlee, and Odin. Man, great great climb by Ronnie Schildknecht, being the big man probably left in this group to get over that climb in third place.
Yeah, and that aggressive move by Van der Drijs just not paying off, got caught towards the last couple hundred meters, and Sanders coming over the top with another 7 points. So at this point in the race, Sanders already has 14 points and is really looking to make a big move on the first race of this series.
Really stocking up those points for sure, but this group, it's pretty small now. It looks like it's stretching out. I feel like we dropped some more riders. We'll get word from the crew at who exactly we dropped, but just over 6 kilometers to go, and they are not they're not taking it easy down this descent. We got over 6 watts per kilo at the front of this group.
Yeah, and just those, like, to note on the points that Sanders has already accumulated, it does take a little bit of that pressure off of being in a sprint finish. You know, if he just comes in with the pack in the top 5, he's going to be well ahead of today's field. But if he comes out and wins, that's a nice buffer he's going to have just to start this series. And we see Joe Skipper looks like he's trying to sustain this move, and he's got a little gap off the front here. It's we'll see if anyone jumps across to try to join him.
On the course to do that, you know, it's a little bit rolly. You know, he's on a descent now. That's not necessarily ideal when you've got a group behind you, but once it hits the flat and some more uphill rolly sections, he'll be able to give it a go. But right now on the steep descent, it's going to be hard for him to hold off. But he's got 1.6 seconds over the group, being led by Barclay and some others trying to chase him back. 1.5 seconds. And Joe Skipper is one that, you know, we talked about at the beginning of this race, is certainly an instigator. And he has the power to hold a move like this. It just depends whether or not when he wants to time that. So I think if we get a little bit more of a flat section here, he's really going to put some power on the pedals and try to stretch that gap and put the onus on that group behind to chase him. And it looks like they brought him back.
Yeah, and it looks like the group's packing back up here, and athletes will rest their legs a little bit. We're under 5K to go. We'll still get one more power up before we head to the finish. So we see someone using a double draft there to kind of save his legs. Kind of cool it down, especially on this flat spot, and hopefully pick up a power up that's going to help him on the sprint finish. And here we go, Van der Drijs.
Yeah, this is Van der Drijs here.
Go ahead, Matt.
It's not. Yeah, sorry. It's not always. The power ups aren't always to instigate or to be offensive. Sometimes it's to use less energy while just staying in the group, and I think that's what that double draft was good for. But here we see, as you said, Van der Drijs looking really comfortable, low 150s heart rate. You know, even though the watts are over 6 watts per kilo as they go over this little climb. Sean, he seems one that has a crazy ability to be able to do these attacks, rest for like 10 seconds, and then do another attack again. And I think he's ready to attack. Here he goes.
I was going to say, will we see a Van der Drijs attack in the last 3K? But I think he's just gone to the front and is continuing to keep the pace high instead of attacking here. But I predict him to attack in the last 2 to 3K and try to string this out and get away from a bunch sprint here.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there is that little kicker that goes up to 5%, a couple K out from the finish. And I know Van der Drijs, I'm sure, has previewed this course. He's looked at that. I'm sure some other athletes have looked at that as well as the Brownlees we have on screen. Alistair Brownlee, a couple-time gold medal winner, no big deal. But they're going to be looking at that as a place to try to get away. And again, Sean, we see Alistair Brownlee here on screen, but he's not an athlete. We haven't seen him do much, and that is a great sign. It's the athletes that we haven't talked about yet today that probably have a great chance of coming across the finish line first. Alistair Brownlee comes to mind. Anthony Costas is another one that comes to mind, as well as James Gunma.
Yeah, and we saw some of the athletes start to burn some of the power-ups that they're not going to use because we're just coming up to the last sprint point. There are no points awarded for the sprint point, but it is a chance to get your last power up leading into the sprint finish. So if you had a power up you didn't want to use, you got to burn it. Hopefully you get a better one. We saw some athletes do that. And back to your point of athletes that are quiet that we want to look for. Kunema has been quiet. Blumenfeld's been quiet. Costas has been quiet.
Yeah.
The Brownlees all looking forward to this sprint finish, and it's going to be fireworks here.
We just got a little call out. We got to give props to the Masters Division racers, Tim Don and Ronnie Schildneck, who are still in this front group in the 40 plus division. Scored in the same group as the rest of us. But here's that little kicker we were talking about, Sean, coming into just a few K to go, 5%. Let's see who's going to go off the front. Is it Braden Curry that looks to be pushing the effort?
Yeah, it looks like Curry's off the front here. Vandergeist back up to chase him down and take over the lead. Troutman and Kunema up towards the front. Lionel still in the top 5, so trying to keep his position towards the front of this group as well before we drop down and finish this final 2K.
You see Vandergeist and Curry trying to get away, do something on that little climb, that little riser, but it's so close to the finish that you're burning a match that you're not going to be able to get back. Reese Barkley kind of hanging off the back, that definitely did some damage to his legs, so he's trying to stay in this group on this rolly section. Again, these rolly sections can really call you out if you're not in the right position in a group.
Yeah, and a lot of the riders using double draft here before the final 1.5K, try to save a little bit of effort here in the lead up to the sprint. Give them 30 seconds of a little more recovery, but over these rollers, it does. I mean, the double draft doesn't affect you if it's not going to help you if you're going up a 7% grade, but definitely looking for some leg saving watts there and really gearing up for this sprint finish.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to save as much as they can while pushing over 5 watts per kilo. And right now we see the group is mostly together, all bunched up side by side. 1.3 K to go. Alistair Brownlee at the front, but certainly just trying to put himself in a good position so he can unload that sprint when time comes. And there they go, under the Flamme Rouge. 1K to go. We have grouped together. We have some athletes coming off the back a little bit, but we have Braden Curry pushing the pace up front, James Kunema, Phil Graves, Tim Don right in there. Hiding in the middle of that group is Anthony Costas and Joe Skipper. Imagine one of those two will probably put an effort in here for a little bit near the end, but here we go. We've got Troutman at the front of the group. 700K to go.
Yeah, look at Curry with the big move, using his aero power up to try to get away from 600 meters out. We'll see Joe Skipper chase. Kenny Vandergeist chasing well too. Kunema on the lead. Does he have enough to hold it here? Half a second going into the last 400 meters, and no, he doesn't. Here comes Skipper and Vandergeist.
Joe Skipper, Vandergeist, James Kunema, Philip Graves coming over the top of Curry, pushing 10 watts per kilo. Here we go into the finish, and it looks like, is it Curry and Skipper and Vandergeist?
It did look like those three across, at least from that first view. We'll have to wait to see what the server
I think it could have been Kunema.
And wow. Yeah, Kunema, Costas, Mike Phillips across in the first 3 positions. Kunema, quiet all race. We knew he was strong over a sprint finish, and timed out perfectly.
I think that has done his homework and really learned pretty quickly how to become a great Zwift racer. We have Kunema, Costas, Phillips, Lionel Sanders all the way down in 5th place, but I think that's still going to have him with the most points on today's race overall. But wow, crazy finish. And Sean, the watts that were getting pushed out from a K to go were mind-blowing.
Yeah, you see the orange numbers for that last 300 meters, huge watts per kilogram across the finish line. And James Kunema just coming across the line with another win in the Z Pro Tri-Series and the first one for this June Invitational.
Yeah, so that's going to put him in a great position. A course like this suited him pretty well, but again, he was so smart in the way he hid. Him and Anthony Costas were able to hide a little bit, and they were really banking on those finish line points and weren't really trying, didn't seem like, from my perspective, trying too hard on those KOM points in between, where Lionel Sanders took a different approach and really went for those points in the middle of the race, and it worked out for Lionel, as you can see here, Sean.
Yeah, and there we see with the GC standings, Lionel using those KOMs to his advantage, jumping up to the lead here with 40 points. Reese Barclay, with getting some of those KOM points, moves up from, I think he was 7th in the finish to 4th in the GC. So big numbers for him. But yeah, Kanema and Costas, I mean, look at that top three, Sanders, Kanema and Costas. Those have been consistent podiums on all of our Z Pro races, so not surprised to see them at the top here.
Super consistent. There we go. Kenneth Vanderdrijs with 20 points there. The surprise to me we had on that first page was, Alistair Brownlee, great performance, but he's, 13 points behind a Lionel Sanders already. So it's going to be really interesting to see as this series develops, Sean, how these the point spreads start to add up. And incredibly talented athletes like a Christian Blumenfeld down in 16th position. So they're definitely going to have to remain consistent, but start picking up a little bit more points kind of along the way on these courses.
Yeah, and I think as the series progresses, these athletes will learn a little bit more about where these points are awarded, especially on the sprints, and we'll see some fireworks mid-race to have athletes that may need to make some play catch up, go for those mid points, while some of the athletes kind of defending the GC top may play it a little more conservative and try to go for the podium on the line. So a lot of tactics to be played out over the next 4 weeks.
You can see who played it to perfection as far as the race win today was James Kanema, but Lionel Sanders really played those points today. Some athletes that got caught out early on screen here today that ended up with a little bit less points were Terenzo Bozzoni, Gustav Iden, David McNamee, Matt Hansen, and Johnny Brownlee. A surprise getting caught out. Only 6 points for Johnny Brownlee. So a lot to be made up for those athletes on that last slide there from us, but certainly 3 more weeks to go and a lot of different courses, as we said, Sean, that suit different rider strengths. So, seeing how many points Lionel Sanders got on one day today, these other athletes have the ability to. Here's a replay, Sean.
Yeah, here we go with Kanema clearly winning, and pretty clear gaps there between the first three. I mean, it was clear who the podium was across that line, but big pack through the middle, and Kanema just timing it perfectly again. He seems to do that on a sprint finish. He's done it on Crit City, and he's done it again here in Watopia on the Figure 8 loop, where we sprint along the flat road to downtown Watopia.
Is a great example of an athlete that is obviously very strong physically, but he's always been a very smart racer. And, he hasn't been Zwift racing for that long, but he's participated in almost all of the Z Pro Tri-Series races, and you can see him consistently get better throughout. And he showed it today with his patience. To have a sprint like that, you have to have the legs, but you also have to let, when Braden Curry goes by with 10 watts per kilo, it looks like that might stick, but it's too far out, and he knows he's got to be patient, got to wait, got to let it happen. James Kanema's textbook today.
Yeah, and that's where the experience in Zwift comes in, and especially Zwift racing. If any of these athletes want to get more experience, I'd encourage them jumping into some of the weekly races on Zwift. Or if any of the viewers want to learn how hard it is to race on Zwift, jump into some of those community races and really test yourself. But great racing from both the men and women today. Super exciting finishes, and we've got 4 more weeks to this. So looking forward to this series.
Yeah, for sure. Both races were phenomenal, and that women's race obviously kicked us off first today, Sean. And I was super impressed with how those ladies were able to split that race up so early. I mean, you could see coming over this climb here, the race was already blown apart. Teresa Adam had a huge part in determining how kind of that race was going to unfold and spreading these groups apart over these 2 KOMs. I mean, they were absolutely blown apart, Sean.
Yeah, and that's where the points for the KOMs do make a difference, and will change the tactics we've seen in the previous Zwift racing. Adding these little intermediate sprints and KOM points are going to have certain athletes really chasing mid-race, and will that break the race apart or keep it together? Who knows? We're going to have to wait and see as this series progresses.
It was really fun watching the different tactics and kind of those athletes taking it upon themselves to get rid of those other athletes early in the climb. And Teresa Adam she was just as Kanema was at that finish, was textbook. Fantastic performance by those women at the front, with Teresa Adams getting that first place across the finish line.
Yeah, and you could see clearly ahead on the finish line there. Had a little bit of space back to the gap, and here we go with the men. Lionel being aggressive from the start, really pushing on the KOMs, taking the first and the second KOM. He had a game plan from the very start and stuck to it. And I mean, we can see here he's been aggressive all day, pulling back moves. Braden Curry with some nice attacks during the middle of the race.
Yeah.
His first time, I believe, racing the Z Pro Tri Series. So great racing for him, and across the finish line with James Cunnama, just perfect tactics and had the power when it counted.
Yeah, I mean, the quality of that field, and for those athletes to be patient and to put that effort out at the right time. James Cunnama, fantastic performance. I mean, I think the one to look out for, Braden Curry showed off the kind of watts he's able to produce, and I think as he gets experience, I think some of these athletes might have trouble handling that man from New Zealand.
Yeah, really, really strong riding there, and great to have him as part of this series with the change in time zones. So a lot of great racing to look forward to over the next 3 weeks, and there is a prize purse on hand. So we'll see who can take this June Invitational Cup and come away with the final prize at the end of the series.
We'll have GC standings each week, new courses each week as well. Sean, I'm looking forward to it, no doubt. And, I think Watopia showed us something good here today. Can't wait for next week to see what fireworks Zwift has in store for us and all these athletes. So for Sean Jefferson, I'm Matt Lieto. And until next time, ride on.